Learning words from context. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about how to deal with unknown words from the context. What is context clues? The words around an unfamiliar word that give you clues about the unknown word's meaning. So by looking around the context and finding the clues, we can learn the meaning of unknown words. Here is an example from CNN excerpts. The topic of the news is about a person who was COVID-19 positive, attended a church service and exposed 180 people, officials say. And inside the news, one paragraph goes, the incident highlights the ongoing tug-of-war between some religious organizations and public officials as they look to slow the spread of coronavirus. If the tug-of-war for you is an unknown word, we can look at the context, okay, by looking at the title of the news and also the surrounding context, and we know that it's a war between two parties, and there's an ongoing something. So by looking at the context, we can kind of guess that it's a struggle between two parties, and it's like something like this. So we can kind of guess the meaning. Tug of war is a type of, strength by pulling against each other. Okay, so even though you don't know exactly, tug of war is a sport, but you know that it's something about that. Okay. Another paragraph from the same news. Disagreement over whether religious groups should be allowed to meet amid the pandemic have led to several legal showdowns between religious leaders and public officials who have expressed concerns that religious services could exacerbate the issue. Another paragraph in the same article continues. Disagreement over whether religious groups should be allowed to meet amid the pandemic have led to several legal showdowns between religious leaders and public officials who have expressed concerns that religious services could exacerbate the issue. So here, if you don't know the word showdown, you can analyze the word into two parts, show and down. And show means a display. So it's kind of legal something between the two organizations, two parties that disagree with each other. So even though we don't know exactly what showdown means, but you know that it's a display of opinion or disagreement. So actually showdown means an important argument that is intended to end a disagreement that has existed for a long time, and in Chinese it's 摊牌. And exacerbate means making things from bad to worse. That's from the context. Some officials have expressed concerns that religious services could exacerbate, do something about the issue, and actually they are concerned about the in-person meeting in the churches. So, and within the context, we know that things can be getting worse. So exacerbate means that to make something worse. Now let's look at the context clues in more detail. There are many types of clues you can find from the context. For example, you can find definitions, find examples, find restatements, find synonyms, find antonyms, find stories, schema or general context, and you can also find series, find comparison, or even find cause and effects in the context. And in addition to words, you can also find some non-text clue. For example, charts such as diagram tables or illustrations such as pictures, or you can find type features such as bold, italics, and quotation marks. And these are all non-text context clues you can find from the articles that you are reading. Now let's take a look at some example about definition, using definition or synonym. Sometimes writers will provide formal definition of the unknown words. For example, the travelers reached the Piedmont, gently rolling foothills areas between a plain and a mountain. So even though you might not know the word Piedmont, but by looking at the words following the unknown words, you get to know what the Piedmont is like. So it's a definition, okay? And more often, a writer will provide a synonym or a brief phrase that define the unfamiliar words. For example, the king's laws were often arbitrary. In other words, he made rules based on how he felt at the moment. So the word "in other words" signal that the following words are used to describe the precedent word, arbitrary. Okay, so when you see the word see the phrase "in other words," it signals that a synonym or definition will come after that. Here are some common signal words, which is, in other words, also known as, also called, that is, or. The author can also use common punctuation to signal the definition or synonym. For example, using commas. For example, the amateur figure skater surpassed or exceeded the judge's expectation. So the key signal word "or" indicates that the words following that is a synonym of the preceding word, surpass. Another example is use dashes. The sculptor usually created a maquette, a small model, before beginning work on the actual piece. And the dash following by a phrase, small model, is used to elaborate the keyword maquette. The next one is parentheses, using parentheses to indicate the definition. For example, thick layers of louses and parentheses, wind-blown silt cover regions of the Mississippi River Valley. So the words inside the parentheses is a description of the previous word, louses. So these definitions or synonyms may not be found in the same sentence, but elsewhere in the text. So the reader needs to look broader for definition or synonym clues if he or she cannot find a clue nearby the sentence. The next context clue is contrast or antony. The writer states how the meaning of the unfamiliar words is different or opposite from the clue. For example, his presentation today was concise, in sharp contrast to the long-winded 2-hour speech that he presented earlier. So in sharp contrast to, indicates a contrast. And so we can know that the words, the meaning following the signal actually is the opposite of the previous word. So instead of being long-winded 2-hour speech, it should be very short. So concise here means the opposite of long speech. So it must be a brief and short speech. And words signaling a contrast or antonym includes the following: but, on the other hand, instead, differently, although, on the contrary, however, in contrast to, or unlike. Sometimes writers use examples to exemplify their ideas, so they become an important context clue. For example, the context in which word appears may include one or more examples that are clues to the unknown word's meaning. For example, our biology class is studying crustaceans such as lobsters, shrimp, and crab. So even though you might not know the word crustacean, but you know that it must be sea animals with some features and similar to lobsters, shrimp, or crab. So at least you have some ideas about that unknown words. And so there are some other signal words for examples, like, for example, other, including, for instance, such as, or these include. Sometimes we have to infer from general context in order to have some idea about the unknown words. And often the context clues are in the surrounding sentences, and the reader must refer or make an educated guess about the unknown word's meaning. A single piece of information several sentences away from the unfamiliar words may be an important clue. For example, this paragraph. By the middle of the semester, John started to see the fallacy in his thinking. Since he had done well in high school without doing much reading or schoolwork, he thought he could continue this routine in college. He now realized he had been mistaken. He would have to work to earn the grades. So even though we might not know the word fallacy, but from the context, we know that it's something about making a mistake. Another context clue is comparison. The writers compare the unfamiliar word with more familiar words by noting the similarities between the things described. The reader can get an idea of the meaning of the word. For example, the amethyst, like other precious stones known for hardness, cannot be cut with a knife or scratched by glass. And even though you might not know the word amethyst, but you know that it must be a valuable gem that has the property of a diamond, very hard. So words signaling a comparison include like, similar to, similarly, resembling, likewise, related to, or in the same way. The next context clue is cause and effect. The cause of an action or event may be stated using an unfamiliar word. If the effect is stated in familiar terms, it can help the reader understand the unknown words. For example, the weeds in the garden are so profuse that I can no longer see the flowers. So even though you don't know the word profuse, you know that there are many weeds and effects that you can see the flowers. So profuse must mean a large quantity that covers the flower. So there are other words that signal the causing effect. For example, because, consequently, that, so, since, therefore, as a result. So how guessing the meanings of words from context is done effectively. there's one research indicates that there are 5 steps you can do. For example, the first one is finding the part of speech of the unknown words to see if there's any prefix or suffix meaning that is clear to you. The second is look at the immediate context of the unknown words and simplify this context if necessary. Number 3, look at the wider context of the unknown word. This means looking at the relationship between the clause containing the unknown words and the surrounding clauses and sentences. Number 4, guessing the meaning of the unknown word. And after guessing, number 5 is checking that the guess is correct or not. However, what happens if no context clue can be found? No, not all sentence or context contain context clue. You will need to use other methods to determine the word's meaning. For example, you can pronounce the word aloud. You may hear a word or word part that you know or that you may recall within the unknown words. The second is to skip the unknown words or look up in the dictionary. So remember, not all words have enough clues. Adjectives are usually difficult to guess because they enter into few relationships with other words, while nouns and verbs are usually easier. So don't assume that you can teach guessing from context on any unknown words. In other words, context might limit. Context might provide some information, but context may confuse the reader, or a single context may provide an inadequate source of information about a word, and multiple measures are necessary for context to be effective. So there's research finding shows that less than 1/4 of words are learned from context. So learning from context is only one of many useful learning strategies. Okay, so when it comes to unknown words, there are 3 approaches we can take, including looking up in the dictionary, guessing from the context, and skipping the unknown word. And let's look at the dictionary approach first. When you choose look up in the dictionary, there are some benefits of this approach. First, it requires low tolerance of ambiguity because no guessing is involved. And you also can have high accuracy of the word meaning, and it required less background knowledge, and it required a limited context clue. Basically, you just look up directly in the dictionary. You don't need any clues from the reading itself. And it also fits some learners' learning styles and preferences. And for exam-oriented learners or learning materials, I think it's more straightforward and it can be very efficient. And for example, if learners have a word list to memorize, then looking up in the dictionary will be more appropriate. And it can be effective because without spending time guessing the meaning or finding context clues, learners can find the meaning directly from dictionary. The second approach is guessing from the context. And there are 2 types of guessing from the context. One is consciously, and the other is unconsciously. So consciously means that you pause, you look around the context, and you try to sort out the possible answers. But I think unconsciously guessing is that you do not intentionally make efforts to guess, but you kind of have the impression. For example, you kind of see the word and you know its direction is positive or negative, but you don't really try hard to guess the meaning from the context. And another point is that Guessing from the context allow you to develop awareness of the writing strategies, because by guessing from the context, it means that you have to analyze the reading, the text, to analyze what are the clues the writers use, and it helps you to develop your writing strategies at the same time. And the next is uncertainty about guessing. So for this approach, the readers or the learners may not be very sure about if their guessing is correct or not. And the next point is, how long should one spend on guessing for one unknown word? And what about some possible mistakes made by the guessing? And should learners check correctness of the guessing? So these are some issues involved in the guessing from the context. The last strategy is skipping the unknown words. And I think it works for content-oriented learners or readers, because if you don't want to pause, you don't want to have any interruption of the reading. So for that purpose of reading, skipping the unknown words is an option. And it requires high tolerance of ambiguity. And it fosters fluency and joy of reading because no interruption. And vocabulary learning is still happening, because after multiple meetings of the unknown words, learners are likely to develop their different levels of vocabulary acquisition. And more reading is developed because no interruption. So the skipping unknown words strategy allows the readers to read a larger amount of reading. So the quantity of the input is much bigger than the other two types of approach, that is looking up in the dictionary or guessing from the context. And it's also possible that through extensive large quantity of input, learners will have possibly deeper understanding or acquisition of the unknown words in the long run. And so these are different types of approaches to unknown words, and they all have their benefits and limitations. So which approach to take? Guessing from the context, or looking up in the dictionary, or skipping the unknown words? It all depends on your purpose of learning, your purpose of reading. And as a learners, I think it's important to have a skillful balance of the three approaches. And so try not to just keep one approach. You should practice all the three approaches and be skillful in switching from one approach to another depending on the situation you encounter. Guessing from the context strategies is also similar to writing strategies. So by helping students to analyze, to practice the guessing from the context strategies, it helps them to be aware of how readers elaborate their ideas in writing. So these are some YouTube videos about using context clue to guess unknown words, or even context clue song. Enjoy and learn. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave your message below. Thank you.